When we deploy our application, we want to do this in a controlled and reliable way. For this we use a continuous delivery orchestration product like Visual Studio Team Services. Let's have a closer look at how we make this happen. If you look at the delivery pipeline, as discussed in the first module, you can see that there are two distinct phases. The first stage is the build and bake stage. The build and bake stage is where we build our binaries and bake the container using the Docker build or compose tools. We push the resulting container to a container registry, preferably in a registry which is near where we need to deploy the containers in a later stage. From this registry, we later distribute the containers to any host we want. The second phase is the deployment of the container, and it can be done to any environment where we want to test or validate our product. We call this phase distribute. Finally, you deploy it to production stage, where the software gets in the hands of the end user, hopefully putting a smile on their face when they see the cool new features you just delivered. Let's look at the build phases a little bit more in detail. In the build phase, we build our software into binaries and we get it baked into a container. In VSTS, we use the build infrastructure for this. The build infrastructure uses the concept of build agents to do the actual build of the binaries and the creation of the container. Agents can run on any location in the network as long as they have access from the agents to the Team Foundation server or the Visual Studio Team Services server. On the right hand side you can see a build sequence. Here we build an ASP.NET application and then bake the container and push it to the registry. The moment we start this build, it will find an available agent that can handle this build of this sequence. Finding the correct agent is done based on demands that come from the task that we put into the sequence. For example, the build image task requires that we have an agent that is capable of running Docker commands. An agent will publish its capabilities the moment it is started. So then it makes it possible for the Visual Studio Team Services or TFS environment to find the most suitable build agent to take care of your build. The second phase of the build is the deployment phase. The deployment phase also uses the same infrastructure as the build. This means we get to use the same agent and we can use them at any location on the network as long as they can reach the Team Foundation server or the Visual Studio Team Services server. In the release management part of VSTS, we have the notion of an environment. Each environment denotes a stage in the delivery pipeline. In this example here, we have two environments. The first is to verify and the second is to deploy to a Kubernetes environment. As you can see, each environment or stage has a set of steps it will execute. This is the same as with your builds, but now the tasks are more focused on the deployment and testing of your application. The steps are executed on the agent that is selected, again based on the required agent capabilities. In this example, you can see that the first step is using the Docker task that can run the container. The next step is we run an automated test to verify that the website is up and running in the container. This can, for example, be written in a Selenium or coded UI to do the user interface verification. Next, we then stop the container and clean it up, so we can run this next time again when we have a new image available. The final stage of the delivery pipeline is the stage where we deploy to the ACS cluster. For this, we also use the Docker task. You can see here that we configured it to deploy to the ACS cluster that runs DCOS as the cluster management software. The Docker task will do all of the heavy lifting for you and deploy this set of containers for us to the cluster. At this moment, the Docker task does not yet support all types of cluster management, but this will come in the following months as the team is building in more support for the various cluster orchestrators. If your favorite orchestrator is not yet supported, it is rather easy to use the command line tools in a task called command line. As long as the agent has the command line tools installed and configured, you can run these commands on the agent to deploy to the cluster. One final note is that the Docker integration task is default available in the Visual Studio Team Services Marketplace. This is very handy because if you want to use this task on your on-premises TFS, you can also install it there. This Docker task can be used to issue all kinds of Docker commands like docker run, stop, push, pull, etc. If you don't have all the support you need yet with this task, you can also here refer to the command line task if you want. This is always your last resort. As long as your agent has all the tools available on the deployment, then it can also work from the command line. At this moment, the Docker task does not yet support, for example, Kubernetes. But as long as you have kubectl installed and configured on your agent, you can still issue all the commands needed to create a new deployment and expose that deployment via services on your Kubernetes cluster.